Azure. We are going to discuss about why the cloud security is shared responsibility of customer and the service provider. Then we discuss about layered approach Microsoft Azure is using to secure the data and services, and identity and access, how the identity and access are very important aspects of security, and encryption, how the data is secured and encrypted, and at the end we see why network protection is important. So cloud security is shared responsibility. As computing environment move from customer controlled data centers to cloud data centers, the responsibility of security also shifts. Security is a concern shared both by cloud provider and customers. For every application and solution, it's important to understand what's your responsibility and what's Azure or a service provider responsibility. When we talk about sharing responsibility with Azure, there are three types of services: IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Let's talk about each one by one. The first shift we will make is from on-premise data centers to infrastructure as a service, stands for IaaS. With IaaS, we are leveraging the lowest level service and asking Azure to create a virtual machines, VMs, and virtual networks. At this level, it's still our responsibility to patch and secure operating system and software as well as configure our network to be secure. Moving to platform as a service, that is PaaS. Platform as a service outsources a lot of security concern. At this level, Azure is taking care of the operating system and of most foundational software like database management systems. Everything is updated with the latest security patches and can be integrated with Azure Active Directory for access controls. Platform as a service also comes with a lot of operational advantage. Rather than building whole infrastructure and subnet for your environments by hand, you can point and click within the Azure portal or run an automated script to bring complex secure systems up and down and scale them as needed. Now talk about software as services. With software as a service, we outsource almost everything. Software as service is software that runs with an internet infrastructure. The code is controlled by the vendor but the configured to be used by the customers. Like so many companies uses Office 365, which is a great example of SaaS application. Microsoft layered approach to security. Defense in depth can be visualized as a set of constrict rings with the data to be secured at the center. Each ring adds an additional layer of the security around the data. This approach removes reliance on any single layer of protection and acts to slow down an attack and provide alert telemetry that can be acted upon either automatically or manually. Defense in depth is a strategy that employs a series of mechanisms to slow the advance of an attack aimed at acquiring unauthorized access to information. Next is identity and access. Identity has become the new primary security boundary. Therefore, proper authentication and assignment of privileges is a critical to maintaining control of your data. Let's move towards the next slide. Two fundamental concepts that need to be understood when talking about identity and access control are authentication and authorization. They underpin everything else that happens and occurs sequentially in any identity and access process. Authentication is the process of establishing the identity of a person or a service looking to access a resource. It involves the act of challenging party for legitimate credentials and provide the basic for creating a security principle for identity and access control use. Authorization is the process of establishing what level of access an authenticated person or service has. It specifies what data they are allowed to access and what they can do with it. Azure provides services to manage both authentication and authorization through Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is a cloud-based identity service. It has built-in support for synchronizing with your existing on-premise Active Directory or can be used standalone. This means that all your applications, whether on-premise, in the cloud, including Office 365, or even mobile, can share the same credentials. Administrators and developers can control access to internal and external data and applications using centralized rules and policies configured in Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory provides services such as authentication, single sign-on, application management, business-to-business identity service, device management. Let's explore few of these in more detail. Single sign-on. The more identities a user has to manage, the greater the risk of credential-related security incident. More identities mean more password to use, remember, and change. Password policies can vary between applications, and as complexity requirement increases, it becomes increasingly difficult for users to remember them. With single sign-on, user need to remember only one ID and password. Access across applications is granted to a single identity tied to a user, simplifying the security model. As user change roles or leave an organization, access modifications are tied to the single identity greatly, reducing the effort needed to change or disable accounts. Using single sign-on for account will make it easier for user to manage their identities and will increase the security capabilities in your environment. These are the few services which comes under single sign-on. Let's talk about multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication (MFA) provides additional security for your identities by requiring two or more elements for full authentications. These elements fall into three categories: something you know, something you possess, and something you are. Something you know would be a password or the answer to a security question. Something you possess could be a mobile app that receives a notification or a token generating device. Something you are is typically some sort of biometric property, such as fingerprint or face scan, used on many mobile devices. Role-based access control. Role are set of permissions like read-only or contributor that user can be granted to access an Azure service instance. Roles can be granted at the individual service instance level, but they also flow down the Azure Resource Manager hierarchy, as we see in the diagram. Roles assigned at a higher scope like an entire subscription are inherited by child scopes like service instances. Identity allows us to maintain a security parameter even outside our physical control. With single sign-on and appropriate role-based access configuration, we can always be sure who has the ability to see and manipulate our data and infrastructure. Encryption. For most organizations, data is the most valuable and irreplaceable asset. Encryption serves as the last and strongest line of defense in layered security strategy. What is encryption? Encryption is a process of making data unreadable and unusable to unauthorized viewers. To, to use or read the encrypted data, it must be decrypted, which require the use of a secret key. There are two top-level types of encryption: symmetric and asymmetric. Symmetric encryption has one key, and asymmetric encryption has multiple keys, like public and private. In two ways we can approach the encryption, as we see encryption at rest and encryption in transit. Let's see each of these one by one. Encryption at rest. Data at rest is the data that has been stored on a physical medium. This could be data stored on the disk or a server. Data is stored in a database or data is stored in a storage account. Here data is encrypted at rest level. Encryption in transit. Network protection is also a very important part to secure cloud data. Firewall. A firewall is a service that grants server access based on the original IP address of each request. We can create firewall rules that specify range of IP addresses. Only clients from these granted IP addresses will be allowed to access the server. Firewall rules, generally speaking, also include specific network protocol and port information. Few examples of inbound network protection are Azure Firewall, Azure Application Gateway, and Network Virtual Application. At the end, summarizing all of the knowledge, defense in depth is the overriding theme. Thinking about security as a multiple layer, multi-vector concern. Threats comes from place we don't expect, and they can come with a strength that will surprise us. Azure has out-of-the-box help for a great deal of the security issues we face. One of the first steps we should take is assessing how much help from Azure we can use based on whatever we are leveraging: IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS.